A luxury car speeds down an icy road, its headlights cutting through the thick snowfall. In the back seat, a heavily pregnant German shepherd shivers, her golden brown eyes filled with confusion. Suddenly, the car slows to a stop in the middle of nowhere. The driver steps out, yanks the door open, and drags the dog into the freezing snow. She stumbles, her belly too heavy to run. The man gets back in the car. The door slams. The engine roars. She lunges forward, barking desperately, but the car speeds away, its taillights fading into the storm. Alone. Freezing. Pregnant. She won't last long. But miles away, a man is about to change everything. The wind howled through the night, carrying waves of snow across the empty road. The black luxury sedan moved steadily through the storm, its interior warm and comfortable, shielding its driver from the brutal cold outside. In the back seat, Samantha, a heavily pregnant German shepherd, lay curled up, her body trembling. The warmth inside the car did little to ease the growing unease in her chest. Something was wrong. William Holloway, the man who had raised her since she was a puppy, sat in the driver's seat, his grip tightening around the wheel. His face was emotionless, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Without hesitation, he reached for the door handle and stepped outside. The cold air rushed in, and before Samantha could react, the back door swung open. A rough hand grabbed her by the collar, yanking her out of the car and into the freezing snow. She landed awkwardly, her heavy belly making it hard to regain her balance. A sharp gust of wind stung her face, and she looked up at William, her eyes filled with confusion. She let out a soft whimper, her ears flicking back. Why were they stopping here? What was happening? William didn't speak. He simply unfastened her collar and let it drop into the snow. For a long moment, he looked down at her, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned on his heel and got back into the car. The door slammed shut. Samantha took a shaky step forward as the engine roared to life. She barked, a desperate, pleading sound, but the tires spun against the ice, kicking up slush as the car sped away. She tried to run after him, her heart pounding in her chest, but her swollen belly made her slow. Her legs struggled against the deep snow, her body already exhausted. Within seconds, the red taillights disappeared into the storm. She stopped, her breath coming in heavy clouds of mist. The world around her was silent except for the wind, the snow quickly bearing the only sign that she had ever been there. She shivered violently, her body unable to generate enough warmth. Her paws ached, and her vision blurred as exhaustion set in. She lowered herself onto the frozen ground, her instincts telling her to conserve energy. Her puppies kicked weakly inside her, as if sensing the danger she was in. Her breathing slowed, her body trembled. If she stayed here much longer, she wouldn't survive. Then, somewhere in the distance, she heard something. The low rumble of an engine. It was faint at first, barely audible over the wind, but it grew louder, headlights cutting through the swirling snow. A truck skidded to a stop a few feet away, and the driver's door swung open. Heavy boots crunched through the snow, and a man's voice called out, "Hey, stay with me, I got you." Strong arms wrapped around her, lifting her off the frozen ground. She was too weak to struggle, too cold to process what was happening. Then everything went dark. Ethan Carter held the trembling German shepherd tightly in his arms as he rushed toward his truck. Her fur was damp with melting snow, her breathing shallow, and her body frighteningly cold. He could feel how unnaturally light she was for a dog carrying a litter of puppies, and that only made his sense of urgency grow. Yanking the passenger door open, he carefully laid her across the seat. "Come on, girl, stay with me," he murmured, turning the heater up to full blast. The warm air rushed over her, but she barely moved. Her golden brown eyes flickered open for a moment, then shut again. Ethan's heart pounded as he pulled back onto the icy road. The snowstorm had grown worse, the thick flurries cutting his visibility down to almost nothing. He gripped the wheel tightly, his mind racing. Who would do this? Who would leave a heavily pregnant dog out in this weather to die? The thought made his blood boil. He had seen cases of neglect before, dogs abandoned when they were no longer convenient. But this was different. This was cruel. Whoever had done this wanted her to die. He pressed harder on the gas, navigating the treacherous roads as fast as he could. His veterinary clinic wasn't far, But in this storm, every second felt like an eternity. When he finally pulled into the clinic's parking lot, he barely took the time to shut off the engine before jumping out and rushing to the passenger side. He opened the door and reached for the dog. She didn't move. His chest tightened. No, 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 come on, girl, he said under his breath, slipping his arms under her limp body. She let out the faintest whimper as he lifted her, a sound so weak it sent a jolt of fear through him. Moving as quickly as he could, he carried her inside, the clinic's warmth wrapping around him the moment he stepped through the door. The place was dark except for a single dim light near the reception desk. He had closed early because of the storm, but that didn't matter now. He pushed through the swinging doors of the exam room and gently placed the dog onto the padded table. Grabbing a thick blanket, he wrapped it around her shivering body before checking her vitals. Her pulse was faint. Her temperature was dangerously low. She was in the early stages of hypothermia. Ethan worked quickly, setting up heating pads around her, rubbing warmth back into her paws, and administering warm fluids to help stabilize her. Time blurred as he moved from one step to the next, fighting to keep her alive. After what felt like an eternity, her breathing finally steadied. She was still weak, but her body wasn't as cold as before. Ethan let out a slow breath, rubbing a hand down his face. She wasn't out of danger yet, but at least she had a fighting chance. As he adjusted the blanket around her, she stirred slightly, her ears twitching. A small flicker of hope sparked in his chest. There you go, he murmured. You're a fighter, aren't you? For the first time, her eyes opened fully. She looked at him, tired, wary, but alive. Ethan felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just any dog. She had survived something terrible, and she wasn't giving up. A small voice broke the silence. Uncle Ethan? Ethan turned toward the door and saw Lily, his 7-year-old niece, standing in the doorway in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. What are you doing up, kiddo? He asked, keeping his voice gentle. Lily's gaze moved to the dog on the table, and her face instantly filled with concern. Who's that? Ethan sighed. I found her outside. Someone left her in the snow. Lily's eyes widened. On purpose? He nodded. Yeah, on purpose. Lily moved closer, her small hands gripping the edge of the table as she studied the dog. She looks really sick. She is, Ethan admitted, but I think she's going to be okay. Lily hesitated for a moment before reaching out, her tiny fingers brushing against the dog's fur. She's pretty, she whispered. What's her name? Ethan glanced at the dog, then back at his niece. I don't know. Lily tilted her head. Can I name her? Ethan chuckled softly. Let's see if she makes it through the night first, okay? Lily nodded, but she didn't take her eyes off the dog. She stood there for a long time, watching as the German Shepherd's breathing slowly evened out. Finally, she spoke again. She looks like a Sam. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Sam? Lily nodded. Yeah, she just looks like a Sam. Ethan glanced down at the sleeping dog and felt something settle in his chest. Sam. It suited her, and if Lily had already named her, there was no way they were letting her go. Ethan sat beside the exam table, his fingers absent-mindedly running through Sam's fur as she slept. The clinic was quiet, the hum of the heater filling the space with a steady warmth. Outside, the storm raged on, the wind howling against the windows. It had been hours since he had brought her in, and though her body was no longer ice cold, she was still weak. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. He had done everything he could for now. Heated blankets, IV fluids, and a safe space to rest. But hypothermia wasn't the only danger she faced. She was still carrying a litter of puppies, and her body had been pushed to its limits. If her condition worsened, she might not have the strength to deliver them. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor beside the table, watching Sam intently. She's breathing better, she said softly. Ethan nodded. Yeah, but she's not out of the woods yet. Lily reached out carefully, resting her small hand on Sam's paw. She's gonna be okay. I just know it. Ethan wished he could be as sure as Lily was. He wanted to believe that Sam was strong enough to pull through, but he had seen dogs in far better condition lose their fight. The thought of it made his stomach twist. A sudden knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He frowned, glancing at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Who would be coming here in the middle of a storm? Stay here with her, he told Lily as he stood up and made his way toward the front. When he opened the door, a sharp gust of wind blew inside, sending a chill through the clinic. Standing on the porch, bundled in a thick coat, was Deputy Mark Collins. His patrol car was idling in the driveway, its headlights illuminating the snow-covered ground. "Ethan," Mark greeted, shaking snow from his hat. "Didn't expect to see your lights on this late." Ethan crossed his arms. "Something tells me this isn't a social visit." Mark sighed, shoving his hands into his pockets. "I heard you picked up a dog tonight. A pregnant German shepherd." Ethan stiffened. Word travels fast. A truck driver reported seeing a black sedan dump a dog on the side of the road before taking off. When I went to check it out, all I found were paw prints and tire tracks leading into the woods. Ethan's jaw tightened. "She would have frozen to death out there." Mark nodded. "Yeah, that's why I need to know. Are you keeping her?" Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Why?" Mark hesitated before answering. "Because if her owner comes looking for her, you know how this works. If he has proof she belongs to him, legally, she's his." Anger flared in Ethan's chest. "You're telling me that the same person who left her to die in a snowstorm could just show up and take her back?" Mark exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't like it either, but I don't make the laws." Ethan clenched his jaw, his mind racing. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't. "She doesn't have a collar," he said, his voice firm. "No tags, no microchip. Far as I'm concerned, she's a stray." Mark sighed. "Look, I'm not saying someone's going to come knocking on your door tomorrow, but if they do, you'd better be prepared to fight for her." Ethan didn't hesitate. "I will." Mark studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, just wanted to give you a heads up." He glanced toward the back of the clinic. "How's she doing?" "She's stable for now," Ethan replied. "But she's been through hell, and she's got a litter of puppies on the way." Mark's expression softened. "Then I hope she's got some fight left in her." "She does," Lily's voice piped up from behind them. Both men turned to see the little girl standing in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. "Sam's a fighter," she said firmly. "And she's staying here." Mark smiled slightly. "Looks like you've already got yourself a guard dog." Ethan gave a small chuckle, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder. "Yeah, looks like I do." Mark tipped his hat. "I'll check in on you guys in the morning. Stay warm." With that, he stepped back into the storm and made his way to his patrol car. Ethan watched as the vehicle disappeared into the night before shutting the door. Lily turned to him with a determined look. "We're not letting anyone take her, right?" Ethan crouched down to her level. "Not a chance." Lily grinned and ran back to Sam's side. Ethan followed, his gaze settling on the sleeping dog. She had survived so much already, and he was going to make sure she never had to fight alone again. Morning arrived with a sky heavy with gray clouds, the storm finally beginning to settle. The world outside was blanketed in thick snow, untouched and peaceful, but inside Ethan's clinic, the tension was anything but calm. Sam was still weak, but she was awake now, her golden brown eyes following Ethan's every move as he checked her vitals. She was improving, but her body had been through too much, and Ethan was still worried. The real test would come when she gave birth. Lily sat beside Sam, gently stroking her fur. "She's looking better," she said hopefully. Ethan nodded. "She is, but we still have to be careful. She's not out of danger yet." As if sensing their conversation was about her, Sam let out a deep breath and nuzzled against Lily's small hand. Ethan's lips twitched into a small smile. She trusted them now. That was a good sign. The moment of peace was short-lived. A sharp knock at the clinic door sent a jolt through Ethan. He exchanged a glance with Lily before standing up. "Stay here," he said firmly. As he made his way to the front, his gut twisted with unease. He wasn't expecting anyone, and after what Mark had warned him about last night, he had a bad feeling about this. When he opened the door, his suspicion was confirmed. Standing outside, dressed in a long black coat, was William Holloway. Ethan recognized him immediately, a well-known businessman, rich and powerful, with a reputation for being ruthless. And right now, his sharp blue eyes were scanning Ethan with barely concealed impatience. Dr. Carter, William greeted, his voice smooth but cold. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Ethan's jaw tightened. I don't think so. William exhaled as if he were already annoyed. Let's not make this difficult. My dog ran off yesterday. A German shepherd, pregnant. I was told a vet brought one in last night. Ethan's blood boiled at the lie. Your dog didn't run off. She was dumped in the middle of a snowstorm and left to die. William barely reacted, only tilting his head slightly. Is that what you think happened? I know that's what happened, Ethan shot back. She was hypothermic when I found her. If I had been any later, she wouldn't have survived. William sighed, his expression one of forced patience. Look, I don't have time for a debate. I own that dog, and I'm here to take her back. Ethan's hands curled into fists. He had expected something like this, but facing it head-on made his anger rise to the surface. You don't deserve her, he said, his voice low. William's lips pressed together. I don't need your opinion, Dr. Carter. I just need my property. She's not property, Ethan snapped. She's a living being, and she's not going anywhere with you. For the first time, William's mask of indifference cracked. His jaw tensed. I could have the sheriff here in an hour, he warned. I have papers proving she belongs to me. Ethan didn't flinch. You had her ID removed, didn't you? No collar, no tags, no microchip. Convenient. William smirked slightly. Smart, isn't it? Ethan took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. If you had any real interest in her well-being, you wouldn't have left her out there to die. I had my reasons, William said simply. And they don't concern you. They do now, Ethan countered. Because she's under my care, and unless you have a court order, you're not getting anywhere near her. William's eyes darkened. You don't want to start a fight you can't win, Dr. Carter? Ethan stood his ground. Try me. For a moment, neither man moved. Then, William gave a cold chuckle. Fine, he said, turning back toward his sleek black car. I'll be back. Ethan watched as he stepped inside and drove away, the tires kicking up snow as he vanished down the road. He knew this wasn't over. Taking a deep breath, he shut the door and turned back toward the exam room. Lily stood there, wide-eyed. Was that her old owner? Ethan nodded. Lily frowned. You're not going to let him take her, right? Ethan knelt in front of her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Not a chance, he promised. Lily looked relieved, but Ethan knew this was only the beginning. He had just made an enemy of one of the richest men in town, and William Holloway wasn't the type to give up easily. The wind outside had picked up again, rattling the windows of the clinic as Ethan paced the exam room. His mind was still spinning from his confrontation with William Holloway earlier that morning. He knew men like William, powerful, entitled, used to getting what they wanted. Ethan had no doubt that he would come back, and when he did, he wouldn't be alone. But right now, that wasn't the most urgent problem. Sam was in trouble. She had spent most of the day resting, but as night fell, her breathing had become more labored. Her body trembled, and she whined softly, shifting uncomfortably. Ethan had been monitoring her closely, and now, as he gently placed his hands on her belly, his stomach clenched. It was time. She was going into labor. Lily, Ethan called, keeping his voice calm. His niece, who had been curled up in a chair beside Sam, jumped up immediately. What's wrong? She's having the puppies, he said. I need you to grab some towels from the cabinet. Lily's eyes widened, but she nodded quickly and rushed across the room. Ethan turned back to Sam, running a soothing hand along her side. You're okay, girl. You're safe, he murmured. Sam let out a sharp exhale, her body tensing as the first contraction hit. Ethan had delivered litters before, but this was different. Sam was weak from everything she had been through, and the stress of her near-death experience could complicate the birth. She needed all the strength she had left to get through this. Lily hurried back, her arms full of towels. What do I do? She asked, her voice filled with concern. Ethan gave her a reassuring nod. Just stay close. I might need your help. Minutes passed, then an hour. Sam worked through the labor with quiet determination, but Ethan could see how much it was taking out of her. Finally, the first puppy arrived, a tiny, squirming bundle, wet and fragile. Ethan quickly dried it off, clearing its nose and mouth before placing it close to Sam. She immediately nudged it closer, her motherly instincts kicking in despite her exhaustion. Lily let out a breath of relief. "One down," she whispered. But they weren't finished yet. Sam let out a low whine as another contraction hit. One by one, the puppies came. 2, 3, 4. Each one was smaller than Ethan would have liked, but they were alive. Then something went wrong. Sam strained, her body tense, but no new puppy appeared. Ethan's heart pounded. A breech birth. "Come on, girl, you can do this," he murmured, carefully feeling along her belly. The last puppy was stuck. He had to act fast. "Lily, stay right here," he said as he moved quickly to get his equipment. Lily nodded, her hands clasped together, watching anxiously. Ethan worked with precision, helping guide the last puppy out as gently as possible. Sam let out a weak yelp, but then the final puppy slipped free, but it wasn't moving. Ethan's chest tightened as he grabbed a towel and began rubbing the tiny body. "Come on," he whispered. Nothing. He rubbed harder, clearing the tiny nose, massaging its tiny chest. Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. "Is it?" "No," Ethan said firmly. He wasn't giving up. Then, a tiny gasp. The puppy twitched, then let out a small, fragile cry. Ethan exhaled sharply, a wave of relief washing over him as he placed the newborn beside Sam. She immediately pulled it close, licking its tiny body. Lily clapped her hands together. "You did it," Ethan smiled tiredly. "Sam did it." Lily knelt beside the exhausted mother. "She's so strong," she whispered, gently brushing her fingers over one of the puppies. Ethan sat back, running a hand down his face. It had been a long, tense night, but against all odds, Sam and her puppies had made it. But just as he allowed himself to relax, a loud knock echoed through the clinic. Lily flinched. "Who is that?" Ethan's expression darkened. He had a feeling he already knew. He stood up, his body tense. "Stay with Sam," he told Lily. As he made his way to the front, the knocking grew louder. He took a deep breath and opened the door. William Holloway stood there, flanked by 2 men in suits. "I told you I'd be back," William said smoothly. "And this time, I'm not leaving without my dog." Ethan stood in the doorway, his fists clenched at his sides. The cold wind howled behind William Holloway, snow swirling around his polished shoes. The 2 men standing beside him, bodyguards, most likely, remained still, their unreadable gazes locked on Ethan. William smirked slightly, as if already claiming victory. "I assume you know why I'm here." Ethan's voice was steady. "I told you yesterday. She's not yours anymore." William sighed, stepping closer. "Let's cut the theatrics, Dr. Carter. I have legal documents proving ownership. That dog, my dog, was bred from an expensive bloodline. You think I'm just going to let you keep her?" Ethan felt his pulse quicken with anger. "You abandoned her. You left her in the middle of a blizzard, pregnant, freezing to death. That's not ownership. That's neglect." William's expression remained cold. "I had my reasons." "I don't give a damn about your reasons," Ethan shot back. "She's safe now. She's staying here." William let out a slow, measured breath. "I was hoping we could settle this quietly, but if you insist on being difficult..." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folder. "I have legal proof of ownership. If you refuse to hand her over, I'll have the sheriff here within the hour. And trust me, I have friends in high places." Ethan stared at the papers in William's hand, his stomach twisting. He knew how the law worked. Technically, if William had documentation proving Sam was his, there wasn't much Ethan could do. Unless... He exhaled sharply and folded his arms. "You can take me to court if you want," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "But you won't win." William raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Ethan stepped forward. "I had a sheriff's deputy here last night. I told him everything, that Sam was dumped in a snowstorm, that she was suffering from hypothermia when I found her, that she could have died if I hadn't brought her here." William's jaw tightened ever so slightly. Ethan continued. And now? She's not just a stray anymore. She's a mother. Those puppies back there, they don't belong to you. They were born under my care, and I have full documentation of that. He narrowed his eyes. So go ahead, call the sheriff. But when I tell them how you left her out there to die, you'll be the one under investigation. For the first time, William's confidence wavered. He glanced at his bodyguards, then back at Ethan. You think this is over? He muttered. I know it's over, Ethan said firmly. A long silence stretched between them. Then, without another word, William snapped the folder shut, turned on his heel, and strode back toward his car. His bodyguards followed, and within moments, the sleek black vehicle disappeared into the storm. Ethan let out a slow breath, releasing the tension that had been coiling inside him. It was over. He turned back inside and shut the door, locking it behind him. Lily was sitting beside Sam when Ethan returned to the exam room. The mother dog was curled around her tiny puppies, her golden brown eyes watching him with quiet trust. Lily looked up. He's gone? Ethan nodded. Yeah, he won't be coming back. A slow smile spread across Lily's face. So she's really ours now? Ethan crouched beside Sam, running a gentle hand along her head. Yeah, he said softly. She's home now. Lily let out a happy squeal and gently stroked one of the puppies. Can we name them? Ethan chuckled. I think that's a great idea. Lily grinned. Okay, this one looks like a Max, and this one is Daisy. As she continued naming each tiny pup, Ethan sat back, watching the scene unfold before him. Sam had been left to die in the snow. She had suffered. She had almost lost everything. But now, she had a family. She had a future, and she would never be abandoned again. Sam's journey is proof that love, resilience, and second chances can change everything. From being abandoned in the cold to finding a family who would never leave her behind, she defied the odds. And so did her puppies. Stories like this remind us of the incredible loyalty and strength of dogs. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another inspiring story. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you found Sam? Let's spread awareness and kindness together.